Hi, welcome. Today we're going to be installing the crankshaft into this Fiat 500 engine. The block's been prepared, as you can see. It's all been cleaned inside out. And we're going to be installing the two main bearings and the crankshaft. These have all been machined at the machine shop, ready for installation. So first, we turn the block upside down like this. Just give you a better view of it. Here's the crankshaft all machined. There we go. So what I like to do, make sure everything is really clean. A little bit of brake cleaner. Just run around the inside of the main bearings just to make sure there's no dirt, dust or anything on the inside of these. Now the crankshaft itself goes into the main block like this. The flywheel end here with those nuts there slots in to the flywheel end here first, like this, through this hole, and then just drop the crank in very gently, just like that. So the crankshaft now is sitting inside the engine like this. Now next we want to install one bearing. I'm going to go with the camshaft side first, which is this side, which is the smaller bearing with the little cutouts there for the chain guide. So first, well, you could put it on your finger, or doesn't matter. Put a little bit of assembly lube onto the bearing itself. I'm using this assembly lube from Torco, but any assembly lube will do. Just run it round the inside of the bearing like this, and also on the thrust side as well, just to make sure it's all nicely coated, just like this. So your bearing should look something like this. Bearing in one hand, hold the crankshaft, okay, so it's in the middle, and slowly slide the bearing in. It will be very tight. It should fit absolutely bang on, but just literally just wobble it around very gently. Do not force it. You don't want to scratch the bearing, and just ease it in very gently. This one doesn't really want to go too well, but it will. Just ease it in. Oh, this one doesn't want to go. What you can do, if it's really tight, just put a little bit of assembly lube around the outside of the bearing, because this one doesn't really want to go too well. Just on the outside of it, just to give it a little bit of extra room for maneuver. So just slide it in like this. Okay, there we go. They are very tight. Oh. There we go. There we go, like this, and slowly and surely it's in. There you go, just like that. It is a bit tight sometimes. So that bearing now is sitting in there, and that should turn nice and freely. Again, don't force it too hard. Just wobble it around a little bit till it goes in. You don't want to scratch the bearing. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts there and 2 screws. So your cleaned up screws, 1, And I would just nip these up at this point. And just put them in opposite ends like this, just to make sure that it's taken up evenly. So 2, just nip it up with your finger like that. 3, and last but not least, we've got number 4 here. And again, just nip it, and then you've got the 2 screws, and they've got these washers behind them like this. Okay, they're like lock washers. All the bolts have got lock washers as well. 1 and number 2. Now I will just grab myself a Phillips screwdriver. If we can find a Phillips screwdriver. I had a Phillips screwdriver, but now it's vanished somewhere. Okay, here we go. Oh, here we go. So just grab a Phillips for the moment. Just nip it up like this. 1. And 2. So if you have a look, that side of the crankshaft should look like this, and that's the inside, and it should turn very freely. Now we'll turn the engine round, and we'll do the flywheel side. Just take some tissue and clean it off a little bit. It's got some oil on it where I was storing it. Again, just wipe it round, make sure there's no debris on there. Now, the main bearing on the flywheel side has a crankshaft door seal. I've actually pressed this into place prior to this video, but this will come, these normally come with no oil seal at all. So you have to press these into place there, just with a press, just so they sit flush. And again, the same with this side. Make sure it's all nice and clean inside. Some assembly lube. Just wash it around the outside here. Ready for installation. Now, I'm going to put this down for 1 second because this side also has one gasket. The gasket is going around the outside of the crankshaft here. Now, this is actually a 126 engine. The 500s are the same. Some of them do, some of them don't. Now, just trying to get some tissue out of here. That's better. Now, let me just grab the gasket from underneath. Again, the gaskets will come in a set like this, so you should get everything you need. I'll put links in the description to where you can actually buy gasket sets and people that are selling gasket sets for the Fiat 500 and 126 engine. Now, in the gasket set, you should have, I'm not sure where this one has it, but you should have, that's not the oil, that's not the seal for that. You should have a rubber band like this. If you don't, then this one doesn't have it, but some of them do have a rubber seal that goes round the crankshaft bearing there. Right, let me grab the gasket that we need out of here, which is this one. So we're going to take this gasket here. It looks like this, and this fits onto here like this, but can you see it only goes one way, so you can't really get it wrong. So just line it up, well, put it onto the holes line up. So there you go, that's going on that way. So what I like to do, again, some people do, some people don't, it's completely up to you. Let me put this out of the way for a minute. what I like to do is I like to put a little bit of silicone round the gasket just to make sure it's sealed. So I'm going to turn the engine this way, oh, or not as the case may be, because it's sitting on the crank. So I'll keep the engine this way. Got nothing to sit it on. I need some blocks really, but beggars can't be choosers. So what I will do next is grab a little bit of RTV. There we go. Just some RTV from Worth, or any sort of RTV or high temperature silicone is absolutely fine. Grab a little bit of paper towel and a little bit of brake cleaner. Just spray it on the towel a little bit. Just make sure this surface is completely free from contaminants. Just make sure it's completely and utterly free from grease or anything else. Should be fine. And again, just do the same with the other side of the bearing, just on the face that meets the block, just to make sure that there's nothing on there, oops, at all in the way of grease or assembly lube, because it'll stop the RTV from sticking properly. Now this is just a rebuild I'm doing for someone. Sometimes the level of gaskets and the quality of gaskets differ. This is quite a basic set. Normally I would like to see a rubber ring on the inside, but it's not necessary. So what I like to do, get a little bit of RTV, if it works. It doesn't work. Okay. So let's try the RTV again. This one might work, or this one should work, hopefully. So what I like to do is a little bit of RTV on your finger, just like this, and I like to just spread it round very, very, very finely. You don't have to go mad. Don't put so much on that it's going to spray out inside. You don't want RTV floating around the engine block. You really don't. Just a fine amount of RTV is all you need. So again, I'm just literally dabbing it on with my finger, just like that. You don't need a lot at all. Just make sure the surface is covered. Again, some people like RTV, some people don't. I wouldn't use it for everything, but I find in these engines it works quite well. And especially as this gasket set doesn't come with a O-ring that goes around the bearing. So again, grab your gasket, make sure it's on the right way. That's the wrong way. So again, make sure it's on the right way. Just dab it over there, just so it sits on the RTV. Just dab it very gently. There we go. So it lines up. And again, a little bit of RTV now on this surface here. Not too much. Just literally spread it very, very, very thinly with your finger, just like this, just so it's covered, just like this. There we go. So now the surface is covered with RTV. Let's put the lid back on the RTV so it doesn't harden. Just clean your finger off, a bit of brake cleaner, just make sure there's no RTV left on your finger or your hand. I'm using latex gloves, it's easy to clean it off, and that way you don't get any RTV where it shouldn't be. Back to the bearing again, we got our assembly lube. Again, I'm going to put a little bit of assembly lube on the oil seal as well, just so it slides on that little bit easier and doesn't catch or rip. And again, the same with this. Just take the weight of the crankshaft, because there's a tiny, there's a tiny little bit of, not play, but you know what I mean. Just take the weight of the crankshaft and gently slide this bearing over the crankshaft. Just just twisting it and wobbling it as you go along, just to make sure, there we go, it goes in, and as it goes over the crankshaft oil seal, just well, you'll get the feeling, just twist it. What I like to do is get a very, very thin screwdriver and just push the oil seal down and just run it all the way around, just till it's gone in, and that way you won't damage anything. Just like that. There we go. Now that's installed. So again, let's line up with the holes. Take our bolts like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And again, 17 mil, not 17 mil, sorry, 13 mil, just gently nip it up. Just very gently, you don't need to go mad, because we're going to torque these down to the correct torques in a minute. So again, just nip that up, nip that up, nip that up like this, nip that up, and nip that side up. Now both sides are nipped up. Before you torque it down, just make sure that the crankshaft rotates freely in the bearings, it's not catching on anything, and it sits very nicely. I mean, rule is if you do that, there you go, the weight should just drop on its own accord. It's sitting in the grease, but it should spin fairly freely. And then this side will look like this. Again, what I would recommend to do, if I can just get that in view, I would get the screwdriver, something very small like this, and I would just run it round here. If you had something that's plastic, just very gently, just to make sure that the oil seal is where it should be. Oh, let me just wipe my hands. Right, so now it's time to torque up the nuts and screws. For this I'm using a snap-on torque wrench, but any torque wrench will do, it doesn't really matter. But really important that you torque them up correctly to the correct torques. Now the main bearing to crankcase are torqued up to 15.2 foot-pounds. Okay, so these are all 15.2, and same with the other side. So now we're going to set this to 15.2. If you look in the camera, that's 15, and obviously when I tighten it, this will come up with 0.2. So it's 15 pounds, that's what it looks like. 15 foot-pounds. So now we just need to find a 13 mil for this. Where are you? So we take our 13 mil, which is here, and I like to just go around them, just knit them all just across from each other, just to make sure it's tightened evenly. Oh, and I've switched it off because I'm stupid. Right, so I like to just go across and just knit them all gently across from each other, just till I feel them tightening, just so they all tighten evenly. And then I'll torque each one up as I go along. And then there's that one. Last but not least is this one. So now I'll torque them. That's one. I'll do the one on the opposite side. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 and 6. There we are. So they're all properly torqued. You can go and check them again. There you go. 1, 2, there. So there you go. They're all properly torqued. It's good just to make sure they're all torqued up to what they're meant to be. The torque readings are there for a reason. But there you are. They're all torqued up on this side. Now we'll spin it around and we'll do the other side. Again, the same. I would just tighten them a little bit till they just start to nip, just so it doesn't pull at a funny angle. And again, I'm going to do the screws last, just for the fact that they're screws. There we are. So that's all the nuts done. Let's just check them. There we go. Now I'm gonna put a screwdriver attachment on, and I'm gonna do the screws. So let's find the correct screwdriver piece, which is going to be and for the screws, because there's nothing that will fit on the torque wrench, if you remember what it felt like to do those up, just get your small socket, and I would just torque them up with a screwdriver bit like this, and just feel it. You can more or less feel that it's the same. So you've got a rough feeling of what it's like, and that's it. If you have a smaller torque wrench, then maybe you can torque those up, but I mean, you should be able to actually just feel. If you remember what the others felt like while you were tightening them, then those should feel the same. So once you tighten them all up, again, just give the crankshaft a rotate, just to make sure that it's free in there, it rotates nicely, there's nothing catching it, and no issues there at all. So that's what it looks like. That's the crankshaft installed in the block. Now the next thing is the camshaft. So the next segment is installing the camshaft. There's the cam. This has got the bits on the end still for installing the timing chain. Again, this has all been cleaned up, ready to go back in. So I'm going to take these bits off like this. Fine. Again, assembly lube on the end of the cam like this. Again, I never believe you can have too much assembly lube. It's always good, saves it running dry when you start it. And again, I would put lube on all the cam lobes, every single cam lobe, just to make sure that they are all coated like this around the wheel that drives the, or this is the gear that drives the timing to drive the distributor. Lobe there, lobe here. And again, this drive on the inside is also important. This is the lobe that drives the fuel pump. So if you are building to original spec and you've got still a mechanical fuel pump, make sure that this one as well has been coated, because this one is driving the fuel pump. And also that can run dry, it's just running on a little tiny rod. Yeah, so we want to coat the bearing here as well. Make sure that's got lube on it. And again, a little bit of lube on the bearing inside here. Just make sure that's got some, and the little bearing inside the crankcase, which I will show you. So inside the crankcase you have a little bearing there. I don't know if you can see it or how well you can see it, but it's just in there, you'll see it. So take your camshaft and gently slide it in like this. Again, it should slide in, and it should now turn with no obstructions, but it should fit nice and snug in the bearing. Again, I'm not going through bearing clearances here, but I assume you have all of that done with the machine shop. Just get all your bearing clearances, get your crankshaft machined if you need to. So now the camshaft is sitting in the engine. So now the cam is in, it's time to put the timing chain on. So I'm going to sit the block down like this. I'm going to bring the camera just a little bit closer. I'm going to wash my hands first because I have assembly lube all over them. Assembly lube and cameras don't really go that well. So let me bring the camera in a little bit. Okay, so there is the engine block. So there's the engine block. So you can see the camshaft here. Here's the crank. Now, this is where we attach the camshaft sprocket onto. So, also bear in mind, in the crankshaft side, I've already installed mine, but here is a little dowel, okay, which the timing gear actually goes onto. So now it's time to install the timing chain. Let's leave it that way around. I'm going to just zoom it in for you guys so you can see. So again, I'm going to get some paper. I'm just going to wipe round, just make sure everything's clean, make sure there's nothing where it shouldn't be. Bear in mind, these surfaces here is where the gasket's going to go to seal everything. So what we want to do now is get our timing chain kit. Again, these are available from a few places. There you go. It'll be a complete kit with the crankshaft sprocket there, camshaft sprocket there, oil seal for the housing, and a chain and the gasket. So let's just get the knife and open this. There's the crankshaft sprocket right there. Now if you notice, which side have we got it here? It should be on this one somewhere. Yeah, okay. On this tooth here, they differ slightly, but on this tooth here, if it comes into focus, come on camera. No, you don't want to. You want to, you don't want to. For some reason it wants to focus on anything but what I want it to focus on. Typical. Anyway, on this tooth here, there is a dot, and I can't really show you because it doesn't want to play ball. But on this tooth here, there is a dot. So on one side of this sprocket, there will be a dot, and that dot will face upwards, and that will be your timing marks. So before we put that on, we have these two pieces which you would have removed. One is a spacer, or it's like a thrust washer type spacer, and the other one is also a spacer with a sealing ring on that looks like a piston ring. Okay, again, assembly lube onto the spacer, and just make sure it's nicely coated like so. And this has got a chamfered side here and a flat side. The chamfer side goes down towards the bottom, and it's got a little cutout as well. Ooh, it's got a little cutout as well there, and that goes over the Woodruff key. So that just slides on like so, and that sits right in the crankshaft like that. Let me just wipe my hands, and I will bring the camera this way and show you all. So that goes into the crankshaft, and that looks like so. Okay, that sits right inside there. Next we take the spacer here like this, and again I like to put a bit of assembly lube on it, just run it around there, just make sure it's nicely coated, and again it's got cutouts on it, just lower it. This flat side faces out, this side here with the grooves faces down towards the crankshaft, so it goes in this way like this. Yeah, come on, yeah, there we go. Just slide that down very gently, it should slide in easily. Just, you can push with your fingers the little sealing ring around the edge, and it should, like this, go in. There we go, and there you go, and it snaps into place just like that. So if I just move the block this way again to show you, it snaps into place just like that. So now that's sitting in there a little bit down from the top of the bearing, but nearly flush. Once you've done that, we can then grab the sprocket from before with the little, there's a little hole, or little indent, little dot. Can you see it there? A little dot there. I think you can see it there, just coming to the picture. That dot faces up. That's going to be your timing mark. And again, there's a little cutout that fits on the Woodruff key. So this will slide down onto the sprocket, like onto the crankshaft, like so. Just give it a little wobble, and that now sits down into place on the crankshaft, like so, like that. Okay. Again, when it's tightened, the crank will be pulled up, and then that will sit down even further. Now, next, let me move this camera a little bit, like so. So next, we can take the other sprocket out. Of the packet, like so, and the chain, also the chain as well. Move that out of the way. Now here we have the crankshaft chain, the timing chain. What am I saying? There's the timing chain. Now you've got these bits here, yeah, see these, I can't, these anti-vibration dampers, can you see them? Okay, those little bits that are on the chain go towards the top. Let me see if I can get this to focus in a little bit better, but if you can you see those bits there? They go up, they face upwards. So let's move this a little bit closer. So the way I normally install this, take the sprocket, wrap the chain around the sprocket like so. Again, on this sprocket there should be somewhere, but I'm not sure where. Just trying, oh yeah, here we go. So on this sprocket as well, can you see between the teeth there's a dot? It's not coming into focus, but between the teeth, if you can see there's a dot, and that dot lines up with the tooth on the other sprocket. So what I would do next is rotate the crankshaft till this dot is facing towards the camshaft, so almost facing straight towards the camshaft. And then when you get your camshaft sprocket, when you put the chain on so the two dots face each other, so you can get it similar like this. So here we go, the two dots are facing each other. Nope, that's out by one, so it's a bit fiddly, but it will go. No, that's completely wrong. So both those dots want to face each other, so it looks something similar like that. If you can see it, one dot there, and that faces the dot there. Okay, so they line up perfectly with each other. Once you've done that, let's put the camera back. Then if you take the camshaft from inside, you can actually turn it till the holes line up on the sprocket wheel. Now they're all offset, so it'll only line up one way. So just carry on turning the cam till you see all the holes line up. You might have to turn it a few times, like there we go. So all the holes are lined up now, and then you can just press it onto the camshaft. Okay, so that's sitting on the camshaft now. Grab your spacers, put them on top, and put your screws in like so. Let me just grab a 10mm. Boom, 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 11, 10. Just grab your 10mm and just lightly, just very lightly nip them just for the moment. Like so. Grab the other side, put your lock tab on there as well. Again, 1, 2. Ooh. Make sure it's straight, that always helps. Cross-threaded nuts are no good. Oh no. Anyway, so come on. It can be a bit fiddly sometimes. Come on, let's just do it this way. Some of these aren't made particularly well, so just always make sure that they go in straight. Might be an idea to loosen some of the others as well if I knit them a bit too tight, just to give me a little bit of play. Oh, come on. Always one that doesn't want to play ball, isn't there? Again, just take your time, because sometimes these aftermarket kits don't line up as well as they should. So just always be careful. Don't cross thread any nuts, because you'll only do it once. And then once you've got it started, again, that's why it's always good just to nip it by hand, because that way you can't really go too far wrong. I can nip the other side and nip this side, and then torque them to the correct values, which I need to have a look in the book because I can't remember off the top of my head. So nip these up, nip them up. Once they're nipped up, torque them to 6.5 pounds of torque. Now, depending whether your torque wrench goes to that or not, because it's quite low, you can do it by hand. So just again, with a small ratchet like this, don't put a great big ratchet on, because you will end up snapping them. Okay, with a small ratchet, just do them diagonally and just feel it. Very easy to feel. They don't need to be that tight. Just there you go. Just feel it like that. Okay, and then once that's done, I would grab a flathead screwdriver like so, and a small hammer like so, and just knock the tabs up. These tabs just stop the nuts from coming undone. Again, before you've done it, just rotate it a few times, and just make sure once you rotate it, you have to rotate it a few times, make sure that those holes and the markings on the crankshaft and camshaft line up. So there we go, back to the beginning, and there they line up perfectly. So now I can bend my tabs up like this. Just onto the screw, just stops it from opening. It's just like a lock tab. So as you can see, all 4 of them, they're bent up, just stops them from coming undone. So now we've got that part done, just give it a wipe. Make sure that all these surfaces around here are clean, because we're going to put the front cover, the chest, on now. So with them clean, what I would normally do is just grab a little bit of workshop towel, like so. Let's put it on the end of the bench. And again, a little bit of brake cleaner, something, just any sort of cleaner that evaporates quickly. Just spray a little bit on the towel and just give it a wipe around on all the flat surfaces where the engine chest is going to meet the block. So again, wipe it around here, wipe it around here, make sure there's no tissue, no debris left anywhere. So that's the timing chain installed, and that's all now ready for the chest installation. So this is the engine chest, or the front cover, whatever you like to call it. This has been, I prepared this earlier. Again, I pressed out the old crankshaft oil seal for the front of the engine, and I've pushed in a brand new one. That's it from behind, like this. Again, you just press it until it's flush with this surface here. Again, if you just dismantle and inspect the oil pump, just make sure it runs freely. Again, check your tolerances between the teeth, just make sure they're free, and just generally clean it all up, reassemble it. Some people like to put a little bit of Vaseline inside the oil pump. It just helps it suck up the oil on the initial start. Some don't. I don't really do that, because the engine's not sitting around for too long. Once it's built, it'll be started more or less straight away. But some people like to do that. I've never really had a problem, but there we are. So engine chest and gasket. Now I have 2 gaskets. I've got the one that the kit came with, and I've got one with the kit came with, and I've got one here. Let's use this one. Don't think it really matters too much. So take the engine chest gasket. Oh, engine chest gasket looks like this. Lines up only one way, goes over the oil pump intake here at the bottom. Now again, I like to put a little bit of RTV around it just to make sure it's sealed. Some people like RTV, some people don't. For me, I with these engines, I've never had a problem with using RTV, and I think it just helps it seal a little bit. So again, on this instance, I'll run a thin bead of RTV all the way around. Again, you don't have to go too mad with the RTV, just a really thin bead. All the way around, like so. And again, I like to pay special attention just to here, because this is the oil pump intake, and it needs to be sealed, otherwise it isn't going to suck anything up from anywhere. So once I run that bead round there, it's not the neatest RTV job in the world, but it'll do. You can dab it out, or I like to put this gasket on first anyway, so just slide this gasket on, just press it down, just dab it gently all around just to make sure it seats properly. Make sure the RTV is spread underneath, and obviously you don't want RTV squirting out from the internals of the engine. Again, around this area where the oil pump feed is, for me, I think it's quite important. I'll always grab a little screwdriver and I'll just run it around the edge there just to make sure that there's no RTV inside. Nothing that could get sucked up by the oil pump and end up blocking oil galleries, etc. but there's nothing there, so that's good. So again, very clean, there's no RTV squirting out from anywhere. I'll just turn that up like this. So there you go, the gasket is nicely stuck. Again, now I'll take the engine chest. Oh no, I won't. Now I'll take the RTV bottle, and I will put a little bit of RTV on top of the gasket here on this side. Right, next I would put a little dab of RTV all the way around this gasket here, like so. Just again, a very tiny bead. You don't need a lot at all, because remember, when you tighten it, it will spread out. And again, the last thing you want is it all around the internals of your engine. So just the tiniest bit, just to help it seal. And again, I like to pay a little bit more attention to the oil intake area, just to make sure that that is sealed, because that's where it's going to suck the oil up from. And there we go, back to the beginning. So just dab it around there, just make sure it's all around there. Good. So again, grab your oil filter, your engine front, chest, whatever you like to call it. Now the oil pump has got these flat bits. Yeah, this locks into the inside of the cam. Actually inside, you'll see the slots inside the cam. Just make sure that you've got them lined up roughly, so when you put this on, it'll sit down nicely, and just slide it on very gently, like so. It should go on quite happily, like so. If you find it doesn't, just rotate the crankshaft, there you go, and then it'll drop in just like that. And now it's sitting on top. Take your bolts, put them in. Again, there's some bolts that are longer than others. You'll be able to see which are the taller bits and which are the shorter bits. And then we got two more here. We got the big ones here, one there and one here. So here we go. So with the 17, we'll do these two up here. I'll zoom out a little bit. So again, just get them started. Just nip it, just the finger. Same with this one. Oh, it's going. Just nip it with the finger a little bit. And then we have two nuts to put on here as well, which I shall find in the box. Again, two 10mm nuts on the bottom of the chest here, where the oil pump intake is. Just nut them up like so. Oh, there we go. Take the 10mm, just boop, and boop. Again, all of these have either got lock washers and washers behind them. So that's the chest now on the engine. Okay, as you can see, very clean install. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the pulley onto the front of, let me turn this around. I'm going to put the pulley onto the front here. Let me bring the camera a little bit closer. I'm going to put the pulley onto here. Again, the dowel pin is in there from before. You must remember to put that dowel pin in before you put the engine chest on, because once you put the engine chest on, you will not get that dowel pin in there. Really important. So let's get grab the pulley. Again, this has all been cleaned up. because this is also the oil filter, because the oil comes in here, it gets slung around the outside, all the crap gets stuck to the outside, and then the fresh oil enters back in the engine. So really important that you clean this, you scrape this all out from inside, everything, because these collect a lot of mess, and over the years I don't think people really service them or clean them out. Again, I will also clean this out because this is the area that sits on the oil seal. Again, a little bit of assembly lube. I like to just put some just around the outside here. It just stops it binding or grabbing the crankshaft oil seal. And this, there's a little notch there which sits on the dowel pin. So just lower it onto there, and it should just nicely, without too much aggro, once we get it in there right, yep, there you go, and it'll lock where the dowel pin is, and it should just sit down like that onto the crankshaft. So from there, now we have these three bits, which are also important. So we have this plate piece, yeah, this sits inside any way around, it doesn't matter, it's got a cutout notch. We then have a lock washer which sits this way, okay, this way, and obviously the notch sits in where the notch is, and then you've got the nut with the hole in the middle, which is where the oil goes through. That goes through the middle like so, and then that tightens like that. There's a normal thread on this. It's clockwise for doing it up and anti-clockwise for undoing it. So you've got a normal thread on there. Now this also should be torqued up to a specific torque. I normally gun these just because it's very hard to hold the crank, and you will get a feel for it. So I'm going to gun it. So anybody that starts saying that, oh, you shouldn't gun it, I do. I think you get used to it, and I've built so many of these now that you feel it where it's right. So let's just get the socket out for this. Well, let's try and get the socket out for this. Come on. There we go. So that center nut is a 32mm. Put it onto there. Grab the gun. And again, you get a feel for it. That's my gun on full power, and that feels about right. And now again, once you've gunned it up, again, just make sure that everything still turns freely, because when you gun it, you're pulling the crankshaft up, it's being pushed onto the thrust washer, and obviously it's tightening the whole assembly up, so there's no play or movement in it. So just make sure that the crank turns very freely, it's not binding against anything. Obviously if it is, then something's wrong, and you need to you need to readjust it and see why it's binding. Now we've tightened that up. Again, this little tab underneath is a lock nut, so I'm just going to get my rubber hammer and screwdriver, wherever I've put it, here, and on the flat part of the nut, I'm just going to bend the tab up to stop the nut from undoing itself. I should be using a larger screwdriver, but I can't find one. So oh, so again, there we go. So that's nicely bent up onto the nut now. So if I just move this towards the camera, you can see there, it's bent up onto the flat of the nut, which means that this now can't undo if it were to, but there's no reason it should. Once you finish that, I'm going to take all these little nuts off here, because I cleaned these out previously. I cleaned all of these up on the wire wheel. So we'll take all of these out. We'll put the rubber seal on and we will close up the oil filter housing. So here's the front of the oil filter housing, which is also part of the pulley. Again, this needs to be cleaned inside. All the gunk and the muck and the metal filings over the years, they all get caught in there. People never clean these. Again, you need to scrape this hard and you'll get like a caked film coming off, because most of these engines have been quite neglected. This goes on here only one way. Again, there's a little timing mark there. I don't know if you can see it. That timing mark goes, there's a flat piece on the pulley. If you have a look, if I just angle it this way, I don't know if you can see it in camera. Let's see. Yeah, here. Let me turn this. There's a flat, see there's a larger flat piece here. That's where the timing mark on the pulley lines up to. So it only goes on one way. So put it on like this. That fits nicely there. Now before we put that on, again, there's a rubber gasket. This goes over this oil filter housing like this. Just push it on like that. I've got a little bit of grease on my fingers just to ease it on there. That obviously makes it oil tight, and we'll put that on here like so. Put our nuts in like this, like this, like this. Like this. And like this. And again, just tighten them up with a 10mm all the way around. There you go. That's the front of the pulley on now. Move this out of the way. Let's get it somewhere. Not there. Okay. All right, doesn't want to go. Anyway, so there we go. There's the front of the pulley. The pulley is now on the front of the engine. So the next thing we need to do is install the comm rods and the barrels. So if I just flip the engine over, it's now quite heavy because it's getting somewhat bigger. Let's just clear the bench here a minute. Now again, my barrels have been honed. We take the pistons out. Barrels have been honed, ready and cleaned up, ready to take standard size pistons and piston rings, as they're not worn too badly. They have these little arrows on them. So you look at the top of the barrels, can you see they've got this arrow and the flat bit? The flat bit goes to the middle, the arrows go to the outside. So this one faces towards the front, like that. And then the other one's the same. Now, what we need to do is grab our gasket set, and in there should be 2 round gaskets like so. These fit underneath the barrels. These just seal the barrels onto the block. Put our gasket set there. So again, let me just lift this off the block. This will slide on to the bottom of the barrels. This actually is a 650 engine, but the 500 engine and the 600 are exactly the same. And then just slide this over like this, and it should just sit on the block like that. And again, the same with the other barrel. Oh, we pop the piston out before it falls out. Now again, with the 500 engine, you need to install the pistons into the barrels first, because the comm rods on these will go in this way. On the 500 engine they won't. You need to put the pistons in from underneath because the bore's too small to fit the comm rods. There you go. There's the barrels on the block, and you can see the arrows there point to the outside and the flat bits in the middle. So there we go. So we're going to move our engine just to one side for the moment, and now we're going to install our piston rings onto our pistons. Again, they've been cleaned up, all the ring lands have been cleaned, they've been decoked, bearings have been taken out. So when you take your pistons out, again, make sure your caps match your pistons. They have numbers on them. So Comm rod number 2, I don't know if you can see that, you probably can't, but there's a number 2 written there and it's stamped onto both the halves, okay? So they line up, and again, piston number 1, this one's just got 2 1s on it. Again, if it'll come into focus, there's 2 1s stamped there. They go together, okay? So there's number 1 and number 2, and again, corresponding, that's cylinder number 1, the one at the back is cylinder number 2. Right, installing piston rings. Take your piston, like so. Now, these have got 3 rings on, 2 compression rings and 1 oil control ring. Highly recommend buying some piston ring pliers. It'll make your life a whole lot easier. You won't end up snapping piston rings, they won't end up getting stuck. Whatever kit you get for your rings will look something like that. They'll be separated into packages, and they will show you the way round that the pistons should go. These ones are made by Marmot, but they're all roughly the same. So first we're going to take the oil control ring. Okay, and on the oil control ring we have the spring in the middle, and when we have obviously the ring on the outside. What I like to do on these ones is what I like to do is take that oil ring out, okay, because you can open this up like this, okay, and I like to just slide it over the piston. Just open it up, don't force it too much, and slide it onto the last gap there, which is where the oil, and then just close it up like so. So it's now sitting on there as a ring. Take your oil control ring and have a look, because some of them, this one isn't, it's the same, but some of them have got labelled on top or bottom, or they've got a mark somewhere for the top and the bottom. You can normally tell if you look at the side profile, but this one is the same on both. Normally the oil rings are, but you never know. Put it into your tool like so, so it locks in like this, so you're able to open and close the ring. So all you want to do is you want to open the ring, but just enough to slide it over the top of the piston. Don't open it too much because they will snap, and just slide it over the piston like so till it goes down to the bottom. Again, just be very gentle and you will get it on there. Although this one's being a little bit temperamental, but hey, such is life. Oh, come on. So there you go. So there it is. Oh, I'll show you this way. There you go. It's on the bottom. It's free. Spins around. The next one you want to take is the second one down, which is this one. Again, there's 2 in here, so just grab it. And again, some of these will be labelled top and bottom. This one is labelled top, so I don't know, you probably can't see it, but on the top there, it might not be in focus, but on the top of the ring there, no, it won't focus. There's written top. The top sits to the top, obviously self-explanatory. Again, grab your piston ring pliers and just slide it over the top like this without breaking it, preferably. There we go, and that's now in. There we go, and that one's in. Always make sure they're free and they twist around nicely. And then last but not least is the top ring. Again, it'll be labelled top and bottom. This one actually isn't labelled top and bottom, but if it's got writing on it, I always put the writing towards the top just as a rule, if it doesn't have anything written on it. And this one goes on just like so. That's it. There we go. There's all 3 piston rings on that piston. So now I'm going to go and do the same for the other piston. Right, both pistons done with their corresponding rings on. Now time to put them in the barrels. Right, when installing the pistons into the barrels, it's very, very important to make sure that they are installed in the correct way. If you look at the pistons, the hole in the center where the gudgeon pin goes is actually offset, okay? It's more one way than the other. Now normally, if it's an unmolested engine, the numbers on the side, when installed, should face towards the camshaft, okay? Now on the 126 engine, which this is, there's no expansion slot, but normally the expansion slot on the piston will face towards the camshaft side of the engine. Now it doesn't actually matter which way the comm rods go on, because the comm rods are symmetrical, but just make sure that when you install it, that the longer end, okay, so let me turn this around, so this longer end here faces towards the camshaft, okay? Or if it's a piston with an expansion slot, the expansion slot is facing camshaft side. So what I'm going to do is install the pistons into the barrels. For this job you will need a piston ring compressor, like so, to compress the piston rings properly. Now what I would do, let me just grab off the shelf here. Again, make sure it's completely clean inside, there's no debris anywhere, no grit, nothing that could score the inside of the barrels. I will get some oil on my finger and just run it lightly around the inside of the piston ring compressor, just to make sure it's nicely lubricated, like so. And again, the piston that you're going to install first, and in my case it's number 1, grab some oil and just run it round the rings, so again they're all nicely lubricated, like so. Next, you're going to take the piston ring compressor, put the piston into the piston ring compressor and tighten it all the way down, like so. Oh, or the right way helps. So again, tighten it like this, just so it starts to push the piston rings together, not too tight, because then you'll never get it in. So you have the bottom of your piston sticking out the compressor like this. Then take the caps, the bearing caps off the bottom, and take the bottom bearing cap off like so, which will now reveal the naked shell there. For this, I've slid the barrels off because it makes it easier, because the studs here for the head are still attached to the engine, so it's quite hard to get my compressor on there. But if you hold it tight like this, grab an end of a rubber hammer or rubber mallet, something that's plastic. Make sure this is tapped flush onto the top of the barrel, like so. And just tap it in, just like that. And there you have one piston in a barrel, and you can just push it down and it should be fairly easy. Once you've done that, before you put the piston into the engine, grab your big end bearings, like so. There's cutouts on the big end bearings, as you can see, or you'll be able to see on yours. There's a notch. That notch lines up with a notch on the comm rod, so there'll be a notch on your comm rod, and just push the bearing in very gently, and that will line up with the notch on the comm rod. Also with these, just make sure that the oil holes, so the holes in the bottom of the bearing where the oil comes through, and the oil holes on the bottom of the comm rod match, because I've had it where some of these bearings, the holes do not match up, which means you will get oil starvation, and well, we know what that leads to, a seized engine. So just make sure that the oil holes in the bearings line up with the oil holes on the comm rods. So that one's in now. Again, a little bit of assembly lube onto the comm rod, or onto the comm rod bearing, like so. Just make sure it's nice and lubed up. I'm going to turn the engine on its side for this. Let me just wipe my hands, like so. Move this out of the way. Move this out of the way. I will turn the engine onto its side, like so. I'm going to slide the gasket back over here again because it just fell off. Again, assembly lube on the crankshaft journal. You can never have too much of this stuff. It will stop it from running dry on first start. Really, really important. There's the crankshaft journal there. They've got assembly lube on it. So all you want to do now is grab your barrel and just gently slide it on the engine, like so. Like so. So just gently slide it on, grab the end of the comm rod from here and just make sure it meets the crankshaft without scoring it. So just push it down like so, and now I'm just going to pull the piston down into the bore so the comm rod now sits onto the crank like so. Oh, now it wants to leave, but yeah, that's attached onto there. Just going to put something here to stop the barrel from sliding off because it wants to. I don't want it to, like so. So I just put something underneath the other side of the barrel just to stop it from sliding backwards. Now you want to grab your cap, your bearing cap. Again, the number lines up with the number on the comm rod. That goes towards the camshaft side. Grab your bearing, snap it into place. Like so. Assembly lube. Again, you can never have too much of this stuff. Make sure the numbers line up, and again the two notches line up also. Slide it over the comm rod like so. And then put the two comm rod nuts on. Just lightly for the moment. You don't need to torque them up as yet. Just finger tight, just to hold it there. Just like that. And I'm just going to, yeah, just like that. So that's one done now. Okay, that's not torqued up as yet, but that's one done. Now I'm going to do the other piston very quickly because I didn't come to it. When you put the pistons into the barrels, just make sure that the gaps on the rings are opposite ends. So set that gap there, set the other gap there, and then set the oil ring there. The rings naturally will rotate when the engine runs, but it's good to have them at opposite ends. Now I'm going to do number 2 cylinder. Now we have the pistons and the comm rods installed. We need to torque up the big end bearings to 23.9 foot-pounds. So 23.9 foot-pounds of torque. So let's So I'll set it at 24 because this just does it in single number increments. So 23.9 or 24 should be okay. So just do one, then the other, and then one, and this one, ooh, and the engine's running away. And then the last one. Once that's done, just make sure your engine turns freely, like so. I mean, it will be fairly tight because obviously it's new. What I've done is I've just stuck, if I can just turn it around, I've just stuck some mold grips just to hold the barrels down there, just to make sure that the engine does rotate freely, like so. And again, I'll leave the pistons right at the top, just stops any debris falling into the cylinder block. Now I'm going to turn it upside down again, like so. Ready to put the oil pump pickup tube in here, and then we're ready to close it up and put the sump on. Right, to install the oil pump strainer, obviously make sure it's all cleaned out. You have the oil pump strainer with a round O-ring, and you have a plate. So we swivel this around. Here you have the two studs sticking out the block. You put the spacer on, like so. You then put the O-ring onto the strainer, like so. And the oil pump strainer fits straight into there, like so. You have two lock nut washers holding this on, and then two 10mm nuts. Like so. Let's get these on here, like that. And like this. And we will just get a spanner, unless my 10mm will fit in there, which it might do. Oh, it should do. And we'll just nip them up. Not too tight, they're not 10mm either. I think they're 13mm. Oh, there we go. So we'll just nip them up. Not too tight. Okay, and that's the strainer. So now we've built everything inside the engine that we need access for. So if I bring the camera, it will bring us close to the camera. We have in here the strainer, the crank, the connecting rods now torqued up to the correct torque, and we have the camshaft in there. Again, the seal on here is really important. Don't forget to torque your Comm rod bolts up. Now we're ready to put the oil pan on. Again, these oil pans come with these, I think, cork-like filters, gaskets. I'm losing my English now, it's getting a bit late. Again, goes on one way. There is the cutout here for the oil return. Just sit it on here. Grab your oil pan, wherever the oil pan is. Oh, it's down here, this side of the workshop. Hang on a minute. It's down here. So grab your oil pan. This one's been cleaned out previously. And again, you've got the oil return gap there, just line it up. The oil pan goes on top of the engine like this. And then you have your 10mm nuts all the way around. Again, tighten them all evenly. Don't over tighten them because you will strip the threads. You don't need to tighten that much. I also do not put any RTV on that gasket. That cork gasket actually seals better without RTV, just from experience. And there we have the whole bottom end of the engine built. If I just take my gloves off, I will take you around the engine. So here we have the whole bottom of the engine built. So let me just show you. So we have, there you go. So there's the chest, the pistons. Bring around this way. And the crankshaft pulley is in there. So it's now a stage ready to put the push rod tubes in and also the cylinder head. So this is what we're going to be doing next time.